Hey, everybody, welcome to the program, WRSA Radio. I am your host, Grenadier One. As always, I hope you're having a good week. I'm late putting this one together because we are in just an absolute downpour of a storm that is spawning tornadoes. It's actually passed over the house as I'm recording this, but kind of done right now. But we've got that weird kind of orange look to the sky that you get in these weird storms. Spawning tornadoes and high winds all in the south. So it's caused me to have to push the preparation and the recording of this episode to a little bit later in the day. So I probably will not get this by the time you hear this or watch the video. It'll be Friday as opposed to Thursday. But anyway, I hope you guys are all okay with this storm rolling across the south, and no one's suffering any losses, no damage, no loss of life. Hopefully that is the case. I've already seen some video coming out of the aftermath of some of these storms, and it's starting to look pretty bad. So hopefully no loss of life. But anyway, so today what I wanted to get into was inspired by something that T.L. Davis put out there, and Concerned American posted it over on the mothership, westernrifleshooters.us. Follow the link in the description below to access that page, and you'll see that article posted over there. It's Normalizing Servitude is the name of the article that TL put up. Anyway, this is a piece that TL Davis put up where he talks about servitude and the efforts and workings of the elites to push us into servitude. Now I find it ironic, as he pointed out, that it is the unelected and government functionaries that by and large make this servitude happen. They're the enforcers of this, the ones that make this happen. I found it ironic that these are the people who, at least, you think, and the kind of the story that goes along with people who go into that job is that they went into it with a desire to help people, a desire to be of service. And in fact, we call it public service, right? And it's just ironic that these are the people who inevitably promote and grow and institute servitude. So it got me thinking about, the person going into that role and how they begin their journey, and why it always seems to lead us to using force to enact their, lead them to using force to enact their will upon those of us who do not choose the same path or don't choose to go along with what they're pushing. This is just ultimately, this is what takes place. I came to the conclusion that these people go into these fields because they are, they're full of optimism. It's usually when they're younger, right out of school, this kind of thing. And they believe that this is where they can have the most impact. They can help the most people, as the saying goes. And that's all old cliche. We know that. Countless numbers of these civil service types will tell you this. They go in with the idea that they are doing this job to help those who can't help themselves, or those who need, the power of government to achieve a greater impact with their project, whatever pet project or program that, that is out there, or idea that these folks have. And they think, well, I can't do this on my own. I can't get, private sector to fund this or put this into place. So we really need this, and it's the government that can do this for us. And they go into all those things, because of that. And it seems to be altruistic and a great thing, like something that should be honorable and looked upon with positive views. But it's not. In fact, I don't think historically it has ever been looked upon as an honorable profession. It has always been viewed as a field for those who can't make it in other roles, or those who are corrupt and petty and slow of mind. A place where people who, are the relatives of those in power. They go to work and they're elevated due to their connections because they can't make it in the real world. And time after time, down through history, when men have created these large, vast governments, empires, and whatnot, they have filled up with these same people, and their reputation has been, rightly placed upon them for being all that is wrong with humanity, just over and over and over again, time after time after time. And yet, we continue to try and do this, to try and make this not happen, or to justify this. And we turn more and more decision making over to these people, and like all governments, when you give them an inch, they will, convert it to a kilometer and force you to turn in your imperial measuring devices. That's just how they function, that's how they think. So why do we expect different results? Why do we think that we are immune to this folly, if you will? Why is it that service inevitably leads to servitude? Now, first off, I'm not trying to convince you of anything here. This is not really a theory or really an argument. It's more of just an observation, just something I think ties a few of the topics we have going on right now together. So I may not have all the ins and outs correct for everyone here, but that's okay. We're just ballparking here, all right? We're just kind of talking about a general idea. I've done service work, volunteer work, and inevitably there are things that happen, in those, I won't say fields, but in those roles. And generally you have a lot of people who want to be there, but very few of them actually want to do the heavy lifting. They want to be able to tell people that they did the work, but not actually get dirty and do the work. Typically a handful of people do about 90% of the work. It's like 10% of the people do 90% of the work kind of thing. Now, I have to imagine that it's the same with civil service work. I think that kind of contributes to this problem. What happens is that the small number of people who are actually doing the work try to come up with ways to get others involved and get the others engaged and carrying their weight. They're trying to say, well, we got these teams of people here and half of them aren't doing anything. Well, how do we get them doing stuff? And they start trying to come up with all these, processes and rules and ideas to kind of, coerce and cajole these others in their office to do more. And eventually that mindset is transferred from internal to the organization to external. It's, well, we've done all we can, or we can't do any more to get the people inside the organization to function like we want them to. Maybe we can get people on the outside to change or alter what they are doing so it's easier for us to kind of lighten our loads a little bit. And so I think this, that's an understandable thing. And I think it's just that's the mindset that starts setting in as an agency or an organization grows and expands. It's not necessarily bad, but what is happening is a slide into use of force and punishment, rod and carrot, if you will, for some of these things. And the trouble gets really going when you get those, few people that are there who are the absolute zealots, the one, who looks at this work with a religious mindset, and they seek to convert everyone that they come into contact to, whether they want to be converted or not. They begin converting those inside of the organization, and then they turn their focus to the outside. And again, this, it can be a good thing if we're talking about a nonprofit or some kind of private organization doing volunteer work. It may be a pain for some people to work inside of that, and it might drive away some people who might otherwise volunteer or whatever to do that. But, if you're not that kind of person, not everybody operates that way, but it's not inherently, bad or evil for that to be taking place in certain organizations. When we're talking about a government agency, though, this is really bad. The Salvation Army does not really have an army. They're not able to use force to achieve what they want, but the government is force. So when you couple these together, you get people being raided and crushed for selling raw milk, stupid things like that. When this, religious nature of these, and again, I'm not even hacking on religion here. It's just this sort of single-minded focus and crusader mentality. When it's not just a job, it's a crusade, then the agency takes on this life and personality all of its own. It's become an artificial intelligence. It's an artificial entity. And when this happens, That is the conversion of this agency going from public service to public servitude. Okay, it's no longer trying to help people and work for people. It is working on people and forcing people to do things. The agency transforms into this self-perpetuating and self-serving entity, and its sole focus is now to feed itself, to expand its power, expand its purpose and its rule. It aims to bring as many people as possible under its purview and its control. It grows and it becomes, more important and more in need of money. If its job touches the lives of every person in the country. So it's going to do everything that it can to persuade the legislature and the administrations to pass laws that, accomplish whatever goals it's set out for itself. And if people, reject these actions, if they refuse to do things voluntarily, then these agencies will have the legislature pass laws that force compliance under the penalty of fines or jail or worse, because there aren't worse things than fines or jail. The legislature is happy to do this because they're getting benefits from this expansion as well. How many contracts are awarded to donors and big entities that these Congress people go to work with when they leave government. They're building their own future when they put these kind of things in place. When you or I are forced under the threat of violence or imprisonment to comply with stupid and arbitrary rules, laws and regulations that we're living under, that is living under servitude. That was TL's point that he was, kind of putting out in there in his articles, that when we're told that we have to give up, basic technologies, perfectly viable home goods, like this week when we were told that the government's working to ban gas stoves and heaters, that's servitude. TL brought up the point of paying taxes on our land that we already own, that we really don't own it then. You no longer own your gas stove if the government is moving to take away you being able to replace it if something happens to it, or ban the use of natural gas in stoves, making it illegal for you to use gas to run your stove. If they do that, it's functionally useless. It's no longer your property. That's servitude. Now, I live in an area that has storms like the one that we're in right now. We lose power. I can't cook when the power goes out because I happen to have an electric stove. So, at least I can't cook on that stove. I have other options, that I've put into place. I have a gas furnace, so I can at least maintain heat with the small generator that I have. But, people who rely on gas appliances will be forced to give those up and replace them. And it's going to cost them thousands of dollars. And simply because someone at a government agency decided that this was, what needed to be done. Millions of people impacted, jobs destroyed, lives changed on the whims of this bureaucracy. That is servitude. Now, that's just scratching the surface of this, though, because, we know that not all of these decisions are self-serving interests of these agencies. We know that these kinds of decisions begin at the top of the food chains. They originate, in the bowels of the deep state elite who have an agenda. And we've covered that agenda many times on the show. I'm not going to really delve deeper into it again. You can go back and listen to those episodes. You know what that agenda is. I spoke to some normie friends of mine the other day. It was yesterday, I guess, and we discussed this gas stove thing. We joked about it. We exchanged some memes, but then I took kind of a serious turn and I said, never forget that these people want you dead and they want your children enslaved, and they believe that the world will be better off when most of humanity is gone and kept to a population limit, and they aim to achieve that limit any way possible. And as you can imagine, that was, you could hear a pin drop after that. The conversation just kind of went silent. And it quickly turned and deflected to, from the seriousness of what I had said. Now, you might think that silence was because they're, my normie friends were just uncomfortable and didn't want to discuss it, and they're still blind to what's going on. But I don't think that's the case. These, at least for my buddies, these guys have been around me long enough, and I've been, exposing them to this long enough. I think they're waking up to what is happening, and while they're still uncomfortable admitting that what I said was accurate, they're beginning to understand and see that it's the only thing that makes sense. And I don't think that my normie friends are unique in that matter. It's the only explanation for the behavior of these leaders. And people are starting to notice that. If we could chalk up these kinds of things to just the stupid rules and regulations of public servitude agencies and their that organic nature that I talked about, then they might be able to dismiss it as just, oh, it's just government being government, man. You can't fight City Hall, that kind of thing. But what we're seeing is not that. It's not just that. We're seeing a sustained and concerted effort to subjugate the population of the West. As I said, this goes to the top and beyond into the darkness and the shadows of who's really making the decisions. And I have hope that we are turning a corner and reaching more and more people who are awakening to this fact. I think that's happening. I think more and more people are starting to see this. And I say that because we're seeing a story come out this week about Biden having classified documents in various places that begins to paint a picture, of the collusions and the corruptions of his family that have been hidden from the public for years. And it's inevitable that the dam is going to break on this guy and his family and his corruption. And this ties in here because this only goes one of two ways. He's either made to account and explain for this, or he gets a pat on the wrist and it's kind of swept under the rug. And the latter of those is going to draw an even more clear line for the normie. Wake more and more people up. It's going to clearly explain to them we live in a two-tier justice system. The elite are not punished and you are. It will further delegitimize the government and the elites, and it will push more and more people into the fringe. And that's a good thing. And I don't think that's necessarily what the elites want. You could look at it and say, well, this is a humiliation ritual. They're going to put this out there and nothing's going to happen. And, they're just going to say, see, who cares? You can't do anything about it. That's a possibility. Okay. It's a possibility. But I think this is a limited hangout. It's a way for the elites to remove Biden from office and kind of fool those law and order normies into thinking that we still have, no one's above the law society. And that, like I said, that's a lie, of course. It's not been that way for decades, but the law and order normies, they think it has been. And they that these things that are happening are relatively recent. And it's just been breaking over the last 5 to 10 years or something like that. They have no real concept of how deep the rot goes. But I think this is a vehicle to kind of counter and dampen down the resistance that is building against them. Like a break, more or less. I don't know that they intend this to be a way of stopping it or putting it all to sleep, back to bed kind of thing. It's just a way to sort of slow down the pace of what is building against them. They're going to shift Joe out to pasture. They'll Epstein Hunter, they'll cut Ukraine off from all the money that's been going to them, and they'll let them die to burn that crime scene. And then the normies will go back to thinking that, everything's not that bad. They can go back to just, yelling at the TV and complaining about other useless or unimportant things. The public servitude agencies are not the only ones with self-serving and self-sustaining agendas. So I think that this thing that we are seeing with these documents, it's a handbrake to try to prevent something like Brazil from happening again. So we'll see. I don't know. We'll see how this all plays out. But that's all I got time for this week, folks. Like and subscribe. Come see us over on Gab and the Mothership, and I will see you on the next episode.